Now, welcome back to another episode of Simon Say, and my name is Simon Yeo, and here's my co-host.
I'm Lyra.
And today we're back to do another episode on elections. Now, Lyra, remember the last episodes, I sort of mentioned that we are 1 week away from election. Actually, it's 2 weeks, right?
Yeah, totally mistaken the time.
Yeah, it's like we are so looking forward to that. But do you feel like the excitement and sentiment is a bit different this time?
Yeah, I mean, the whole atmosphere is a little bit electric, would you say? I mean, despite the lack of campaign that we're seeing, there's just something different about this whole atmosphere. I guess probably because people saw the results of G14, despite what the naysayers are saying about the results from G14. There is just something that is different, as in you have achieved it once.
Yep.
Perhaps this is another time that we could do it again.
Yeah, so for those of you who missed the last episode, we actually talk about what was achieved in G14. And even though Pakatan Harapan was only in government for 22 months, I think not just them, but the whole fact of the change of government really brought something into these nations. So we are really very excited about this election cycle.
Yep.
Now today we want to really look at some of the manifesto, right, that has been presented by the bigger coalitions, and it's very interesting. But before that, I thought it would be interesting just to kind of share with all our viewers, all our listeners, you know what this Simon Says podcast is all about. Because we do come from quite a unique point of view, right?
Yep.
And, you know, if you've been following our episodes, you know, we always talk about freedom. And it's because what we really want to do is to present a grassroots expression. To, you know, if you want to use the words, we are inspired by the populist movements all around the world.
Yep.
Now, if you've been listening to mainstream media, you will think that it's a bad thing. But I just want everyone to have an open mind and just think about the world that you want to live in. And we always say, look, we are for freedom. We are for the opportunity to pursue happiness.
Yep.
That's why we did so many episodes on COVID, right? Because we just couldn't stand the tyranny of stomping over our freedom and liberty,
Yep.
over control, over vaccines. And interesting about vaccine, right? I mean, it's kind of like exploding right now.
Indeed. Well, one of the very thing that has been just lingering in the media, and especially something that we probably wouldn't see as much if you're just following the legacy media,
Yep.
is the fact that all over the world, the globalists are shouting that we need amnesty. We need amnesty, but what sort of amnesty? I mean, are you doing certain things without you having been informed of the risk, or are you actually knowingly imposing the risks on the people who are actually the vaccine recipients?
Yeah, just for the benefit of our listeners and viewers, what these people in authority are saying, and the same media that push for lockdown, for compulsory vaccinations, all of a sudden, because Pfizer is now under a lot of pressure because they were called by parliament, by legislator, and just recently in Holland, right, they admitted that they never tested their vaccine for transmission.
Yeah, that's so absurd. Right?
And we're already hearing in United States, insurance company want to start legal suit against Pfizer and Moderna because what they are promising is simply not there.
Yep.
The efficacy is very, very low. So I really feel like a time of reckoning is coming, and that is why. And this article you're showing me is from The Atlantic. It's one of the most liberal publications, and they are shouting amnesty because they knew they had been caught with their pants down. But anyway, that's another topic for another time. But we just want to kind of reintroduce again to all our listeners now that we have moved into video platform. Now do subscribe our channel, YouTube, Rumble, and of course the good old Spotify. Right?
Yep.
And so we also talk about we desire small government, because when you have big government, then you have more interventions. And we just need enough regulation, but not too much. Because at the end of the day, government is really just to manage our tax, right? Our revenue.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, you wouldn't want your whole revenue to be spent on just basically going into the pockets of these group of politicians who really just care about themselves and not really so much on the benefits of the people.
And we're just saying, the way in the past, especially by Barisan Nasional, how they campaign, they'll be using government machinery, they'll be using government's money, taxpayers' money. It's like you are using companies' money to buy your own share, which, by the way, is illegal under Companies Act. But why is it so legal and acceptable for the government? So these are the kind of things that we do talk about from time to time. And that will be the perspective where we come from when we talk about the manifesto. All right, so with that, shall we move into the manifesto itself?
Yes.
And there's so many topics. So Lara, I'll let you have the pick first. Just choose some, and we want to compare the major coalition, right? Which is basically Pakatan Harapan. We have Barisan Nasional. We have Perikatan Nasional. So it's interesting that so Malaysia Kini here have just kind of put them side by side. If it's a bit small, you can just refer them online. But why don't you choose some and then we can kind of go over it?
All right. So since we have been talking about the amnesty, maybe let's jump straight into health then before we go into cash handout.
Okay.
So let's go into health.
All right.
So it's interesting. I mean, the first thing that caught my mind is actually Barisan Nasional's manifesto on this part where it says doubling annual health budget from 36 billion to 77 billion by 2027, or 5% of the GDP. So what's your take on this?
That's KJ, right?
Yeah, it's so him. I mean, as in, when we look at this, you can't help but to think that it has all his fingerprints on this whole portion. And he recently has been just shouting, it's like, look, I know that I have to get out of my previous place.
Yep.
And so I'm asking the Prime Minister for Sungai Buloh. So, but I can't help but think, and you're talking about KJ with the whole group of globalists that are really, I don't think he's unaware of the risk of all this vaccine when he was just pushing it out. And I can't help but think about the part where he was talking where if you're not going to get vaccinated, we're going to just make your life difficult. And that is the very thing that we are so against in this podcast, whereby we are all really for the liberty of the people, away from the tyranny.
Yeah, it's one thing if the data is really correct and available to say, look, this is so contagious and you shouldn't come out, people shouldn't go to school. But increasingly, we saw, right? I mean, it's so very little cases with children. It doesn't affect the children. It's a very targeted disease. But the authority doesn't want to say it. They were like, this is what it is. And now the shout for amnesty. So that's really... And so that's why we want to remind people, look, if you are if you feel like, look, KJ looks like he was a good health minister, he has done a good job, try to look at his record. Try to remember the way he threatened people while he was the vaccine czar and then later on health minister. Don't forget that. The internet never forgets.
Yep.
So everything we say can be verified. But of course, you can always drop a comment and we will try to put some link. It's there. And that's a good thing. The good and bad of internet.
And recently, I just had a conversation with some of my colleagues, and they are just saying that, look, yes, they are aware of the corruption that is going within the coalition itself, but they like someone who has strong leadership.
Yep.
And KJ seems to present that person, like a good candidate for Prime Minister.
Yeah, because he has the charisma. I mean, make no mistake about that. He has a charisma. And I just feel like a lot of voters are still kind of enamored by that. It's like we want someone... I mean, if you look pretty, you look handsome, I think those are all plus points. I mean, it's a reality.
That's true.
I mean, we look at the recent midterm, right? And they were just saying that some of the candidates, they got in because they look handsome and pretty.
Well, midterms, the one that we are talking about is the one in United States that have just happened.
Yeah, that's another episode for another time, but it will be interesting to talk about that also. So health, it's just KJ. And he's trying to leverage that to win. But let us just remind you, if you put KJ into parliament, you are helping Barisan Nasional to form federal government one step closer.
Yep, indeed. And maybe let's go into the next portion, which is the cash handouts.
Yep.
I think it's interesting that PH is saying that one of the manifesto is subsidy cards or e-wallets for farmers. So this reminds me of Felda settlers.
Yep.
What's your take on this?
Yeah, we're just talking about this before the show, right? That targeted assistance is good, you know.
Yep.
So remember during pandemic and even before that, during Najib's time, a lot of the handout are really just handout, you know, and it's like you come and get 100 ringgit, 150 ringgit. And after a few years, I think people kind of realize it is not really helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get 200-300 ringgit. Maybe I'm happy for a while. Maybe I can get a nice meal for a while. But it doesn't help my life. It doesn't improve my life.
Nope.
So I think targeted assistance is better. But one of the things I just want to mention here, because all these categories you can see, cash handout, education, health, social security, childcare, you know, they're somewhat linked. They are all in the category of personal benefit or benefit from my family, which, by the way, nothing wrong with that. It is okay to desire that. But that's where, when we come into election, we have to look at the choices before us. Because a lot of people will be like, look at the institutional reform, look at the courts, independence, talk about MACC reform. A lot of people, they hear this thing, they'll be like, irrelevant, because I don't even have enough to fuel my food. And that's where I want to encourage all the voters, that when you vote, yes, you are thinking about what's important for you personally, but you also have to consider what's important for your nation, for your future. Because some of you will be like, okay, I'm going to die soon, or I'm going to die a bit later. But when you want to ensure a better future, you want to make sure like for example, Undi 18 happened, and all of a sudden, the next generation has a voice.
Yep.
But if the opposition in the past had not fought for that, there is no Undi 18 today.
Yeah, exactly.
And so people need to remember that it's not just what's on my plate, what's over my head, what's the roof over me. So those are important. We're not downplaying that, but I'm just saying that in the election, it includes what you are voting for the nation as well. And so we just want to encourage everyone, let's just broaden, let's just have a more futuristic mindset. And this reminds me of the American Red Indians. You know, they are so perceptive of how their actions might affect the future. Every time, you know, they have huge trees in those places, and every time they want to cut it down, they want to kill a bear, they will think about how does it impact my generation and next generation. So, I mean, it's just mind blown, right, to think about that.
Yeah, I mean, we just talked about this afternoon. We have been talking about like how the next generation, Generation Z, how they are voting. And would you think that they are actually voting more on like some ideology and rather than, or like something that benefits them, or until they become a parent, only then they will start thinking about the next generations?
It's really, really interesting because, you look at the manifesto, there is some more ideological thing, I suppose, like environment, minority rights, disabilities, and these days, of course, in the West, in the liberal West, what is very popular is just identity politics. So basically, it's like, oh, we have 5 board members, we must have 1 minority, we must have 1 female. You know, if you've been to our podcast long enough, you will know that we are very, very, very against that. Why? Not because we don't want to give opportunity to a certain people, but we want to talk about, do you have the ability? Why do you want to just put someone there because of their skin color, because of their identity? I mean, I think that's racism of the highest order.
Yeah, and it's interesting because just now I was just having a quick glance over the overall manifesto and realized that Barisan Nasional is actually quite sleek in putting in all these things and like certain things like, oh, we're helping women. But in fact, they are the party that actually maybe sidelining women leadership. I mean, that is the talk of this.
Yeah, especially when the candidate were announced. I mean, Barisan Nasional have so little. women candidate is unbelievable. So they were under siege. Now remember their manifesto came a few days after the nominations, and I think they're just kind of playing defense.
Yep.
They have been pressurized. I mean, I look at this. To me, it's like they just hire a consultant, come up with something that makes us look a bit better. But I don't think they look better. They look pretty bad.
Yeah.
And with that, I think let's move on to the next part, okay? And maybe we can show the anti-corruption tab. So anti-corruption, institutional reform. Now, is it what really, what really strikes it? I mean, look at the screen. What's interesting here? It's like Perikatan and Barisan Nasional have no institutional reform.
No.
I mean, anti-corruption. Okay, let's look at the next one. Institutional reform. I mean, just very quickly. You see, very short again. I mean, look at election reform. Election reform, the next one.
None from Pakatan National and Barisan National.
Yeah, I think the tag team just... All right. None. So to our listeners and viewers, we just want to highlight, look, it's like it seems to Perikatan Nasional and Barisan Nasional that it is not important. And maybe this speaks about the target audience. Maybe they're just trying to go back to what traditionally works for them. The semi-urban, the rural voters, the less educated, the older generation.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned about this, where they don't change what they have been talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I was just reading the MAGA Doctrine by Charlie Kirk.
Yep.
And the first thing, the preface that he wrote was he made a comparison between Republicans and Democrats, whereby he said before 2016, both party have just been playing the same cards over again until someone who disrupts the whole political landscape in the United States come along. So it's really, really interesting that you mentioned this. It's almost like, could that be a prediction for what is going to come here in Malaysia? Yeah,
I mean, of course, now to our viewers and listeners, we are talking about 2016 Donald Trump, the disruptor. Like him, hate him, he changed American politics forever. But here, 2022, I feel like we have maybe not quite similar, but because of Undi 18, there is a once in a generation opportunity. Now, this may play out over a few GE. So that's why, again, one of the things I want to encourage all the listeners and viewers that if the election result doesn't go the way you hope, I really believe that Undi 18's impact will kind of spill over the next GE, not just once. And we have to have that kind of patience to let the whole thing unravel,
Yeah,
so,
and that's one of the fruits that we saw from
GE14.
Yeah, GE14 from the last government, PH.
Yeah, exactly. Because since they came, they are the one who kind of... So these are the kind of quote-unquote progressive policies that I like because, hey, you're empowering people, you're giving more freedom. And so that's why depending on the turnout, we might have something that really surprises. I mean, the last time Malaysia had a great surprise. Now, 2018 was a surprise in a way that is outright, but it's not really a surprise because GE13 was close. GE14, they kind of crossed the line. But what was really surprising was 308.
Yeah.
And it's like out of nowhere, all the urban places, Selangor fell, Perak fell, Penang fell. I still remember the Gerakan chief minister, and he was like just so sheepishly, he's like, okay, you all rejected me, I'm going to pack my bag and leave. Can't remember if he's saying call Sukun, right? I think. Yeah. So I can just still remember his face. I mean, to his credit, he took it with stride and he just bye, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I think he looked shell shocked that Gerakan was given a thrashing and Penang was never the same. So I did get that feel that maybe there's that opportunity. It really depends on the turnout. Because do you agree that because the young people are more ideological, I mean, I'm talking about the Generation Z, then they are more likely to support a platform like Pakatan?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I've been asking some of my colleagues who are considered as this generation.
Yep.
They say, look, this time we will support PH. But that doesn't mean that every time we're going to support PH.
Yeah, of course. That's a good and healthy approach. But just looking at the manifesto, PH1 is really more ideological. I think it kind of speaks more to the Generation Z. And, I just get that feeling. We're not Z, we're not even Y. I'm not even Y, inside. So you are Y. And so interesting, I just find it interesting. And now one of the things about Generation Z is, now I want to talk a little bit about the American midterm, because so interesting, right? And now, of course, midterm, the House is changing, the Senate is changing, but one of the data that came out, of course, is that the Generation Z favors the Democrats, which is more radical, open border, legalization of drug, abortion, transgender. Is it all the more just very, very ultra liberal? But one of the commentators was just saying that, look, the Generation Z, now I use Z because American always use Z, right? So Generation Z have always been anti-normal things. Okay, for the lack of a better word. I don't want to say anti-establishment, but because they are more than that.
More
so
rebellious?
Yeah, I think so. It's like, if this is normal, I want to be abnormal.
That's true.
And that's what the Democrat Party represents today. So he said it has been like that since 60s, 70s, 80s. But then when they mature, they get married, they have kids, then their point of view change.
Interesting.
So I guess the point he was trying to make was that, look, it's not very alarming because it's always like that. You're going to have, and that's why the young people generally tends to favor a more radical point of view.
Yeah,
one way
someone
or
like
another.
Barack Obama.
Yeah, I guess so. We're talking in very broad brushes, but the data is what it is. It shows what it is. All right, so let's come back. Any other area that really interests you?
Perhaps the disaster response.
Well, it is relevant because you remember what this election was called, right? Undi Banjir, and I mean, the last 10 days is like raining every day. It will not be inconceivable to say that it will rain on election day.
Yeah.
Quite likely. So one of the things, if you're a first-time voter or your area of voting has a lot of voters, do not wait until 3 or 4 or 5 p.m. You may be stuck somewhere. We have to vote early because we need to catch a flight back to KL. We're going to Cebu, okay? All right. Now, another thing that it kind of interests me, and I want to just have a quick look, okay, and is this one, right? What was it? Press freedom, right? We already mentioned that, press freedom. Now, press freedom, because it's... Okay, let me just try to get it. Press freedom. All right, press freedom. Look at press freedom. Is it on the screen? Okay, the tech team is trying to find it. Yeah, it's quite at the top. It's right after parliamentary reform. Found it. Okay, what's interesting about press freedom?
There's none.
There's none from Perikatan. There's none from Barisan Nasional. I mean, okay, Perikatan, the current, of course, now he's a caretaker interior minister, Hamza, right? So from Bersatu, he is the minister in charge of police and things like that. Just, I think yesterday or the other day, some DAP members were just complaining that, look, police are now saying we need a permit for walk around. And it's so crazy, right? So it's like, where's the freedom? So there's some good things here. Freedom of Information Act. Freedom of Information Act, for those who are not aware, is just basically certain documents, public or private, if it has enough public interest, if it is sufficiently important for public interest, then the act allowed the document to be extracted into the public view. So of course, this may involve a judge, this might involve a tribunal to make a determination. So we're mainly talking about government record. because government, you are supposed to be accountable to us.
Yep, indeed.
And so freedom of information, I know this very well because this is something very, very common in Australia, and they are one of the pioneer in this region. Then, of course, the things that originally Pakatan Harapan say they're going to do, but they failed to do: repeal of Sedition Act, Communication and Multimedia Act, and that's one of the things that is so common. I mean, if we're going to broadcast in Facebook or YouTube or things like that, we fall under that, If the government doesn't like what we say, that they're going to come after us using Communication and Multimedia Act. So I remember when Pakatan Harapan took over, Gobind Singh was the minister. And so he expressly said this will not be used. But of course, then changed government. And, even some of the people we know have been interviewed and sometimes even charged under this. And because there's a section that they can use this very, very vague and general and say, what you say create disharmony, whatever that means.
But what's the proof?
So it's like, what? I mean, the proof will be, not the proof, they will use your video, but does it create disharmony? And I think even if you play it, the judge will be like, what's happening here? So I hope if these cases go to the court, we get some sensible judges and say, please don't waste my time.
Yep.
And that's why we really believe, look, you're not supposed to defame people because we have the defamation law. You're not supposed to tell lies. You're not supposed to give false information. But we're not talking about this. We're talking about different point of view. So that's why going back again to COVID, every time people have a view that is different from the different view from the establishment, the COVID establishment, then, the Facebook will put a tag, Spotify will put a tag, and Kyrie will threaten you.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we got so much of that tag in our Spotify account.
Yeah. All right. So, wow, it's like almost half an hour already. Our time is almost up. We still have, but I think we kind of go through the areas that we like. But do you have any other concluding comments you want to make regarding Manifesto? Then we will kind of move into what some of the final take regarding the election, because I think when this video is out, it will be just a few days from election.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, looking at all the manifesto, I think it is interesting, but again, we do need to vote wisely based on the kind of government that you want to see in Malaysia, the kind of change that you want to see in Malaysia. So that is a very important take here.
Yeah, and also, do you remember when Pakatan came out with the manifesto, the buku jingga and things like that? Then, of course, they couldn't fulfill many things, and they received a lot of criticism. But kudos to them that they didn't back down and they came back again. Okay, this is a much more simplified, less ambitious, but there are still some good points. And I'm glad BN and Perikatan also came out. I mean, even though not as good in terms of the reforms that we want to see, but they are trying and they feel like they have a different market. Now once again, I just want to encourage people that if you vote primarily for your personal benefit, it's not a wrong thing. Don't get me wrong. It's not wrong. But I just want to encourage you, look at all the different issues, look at the reforms that needs to happen. You are really voting for something greater and more important than yourself.
Yep, indeed.
Any other concluding thoughts and on this election? Anything that, it could be just something you read, something you feel, even some seed or prediction, even if you want to. I'm not sure you want to get into the business of prediction.
Maybe not.
Maybe not. But yeah, just any concluding thoughts regarding the upcoming GE15?
I think looking at what has happened in the US midterms, where a lot of media are just trashing the red wave. They're just saying that it's not as great, the results that they hope for. I hope that Malaysia doesn't go into another cycle of hope defer once again, because that is the very thing that, this platform is wanting to fight. The hope defer. We should never get into that state of not hoping for a better Malaysia once again. So we really need to just hold the line, like what Kerry Lake was saying. I think it's really, really interesting. I mean, looking at what happened in Israel and looking at what happened in Italy,
Yep.
those are really, really good inspiration. And even what happens in the United States, like Arizona as well.
Yep. Yeah, it's very interesting you use all these example because they went through cycle of ups and downs. So Italy basically had 10 years where the prime minister was not really elected because of collision, because of changes, because of deals. And what happened with United Kingdom and Australia previously, people are a bit disfranchised with the whole thing because it's like, that's why I say this, because people are kind of manifesting the effect of Sheraton. And I think part of the reason why some people say I got cheated, they're referring to Sheraton. But I really feel like because of Sheraton, we are in a better place today. We are more aware of the pitfalls. We are more, I think we are more realistic in terms of where these nations needs to be, and it's going to take a long fight. And it is an information war. Now, one of the things that really struck me when you say about this hope defer is, who do you think benefit from hope defer?
The
incumbent, because hope defer caused people to go into status quo. So that's why when the news come out and they'll try to kind of, that's why there's so much talk about, look, GE14 accomplished nothing. No, that's just such a wrong approach, and it will cause us to be more and more disappointed. So I think that's one of the things we want to fight, this sort of information trend. And yeah, we encourage everyone to kind of find out. Maybe you can even be an independent media producer. I just kind of foresee more and more happening, because in United States, in Italy, in all these places, they're coming out with the independent media because they cannot trust the mainstream media.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you talk about information war, because I can't help but just really think about the key battleground in Arizona, whereby if you just look at the mainstream media like CNN, you wouldn't know that Carrie Lake is actually leading. She is actually causing Blake Masters to also have a lead as well.
Correct.
Which is so interesting. And there are a lot of commentators that say that never before have they seen someone like her, that she could just rally the support for another politician. It's like, if you're a politician, you mostly care about yourself more than like demonstrating that sort of leadership. And I thought it's really, really interesting and really encouraging, especially for some of us who really want to go into like independent media reporting, and you really just look at both sides of the aisle and what sort of things that they are reporting, and how come some of the things like what Carrie Lake and her campaign are just saying that, look, we are leading, but you don't see it elsewhere in the other mainstream media.
Now for those who are listening and watching, you may be wondering, why are we referencing so much to the American politics? Because I tell you, we have so much similarity with America. We are like a rainbow nation. We have a federation. We have state power. And it's very interesting that at the beginning of the inception of America, they almost became like us. We're fully dominated by federal, which is the situation now. But the third president, Thomas Jefferson, kind of pushed back and gave the state rights. So I think we need to do one episode, lessons from America midterm for Malaysia, because it really gives us encouragement. It gives us even some of the tactic, and even the way they try to steal election. I think the playbook, they kind of took it from Barisan Nasional. It's like we are the original, the OG cheater, It's like everything they have done, we've seen it in Cebu in the 80s, in the 90s, those kind of things. It's so funny, It's like, but thank God that, through PACA, through the understanding the rules and things like that, this sort of blatant cheating is now minimal in Malaysia. And so that will be interesting. And after our own GE, we want to come back to talk about that.
Yep.
All right. So I think our time is out. So happy votings. In a few days' time, you'll all be going out. Now, we don't tell you who to vote. It is your personal conscience. There is no right or wrong in terms of exercising the right. But do remember, there are consequences for everything. There are consequences for skipping the vote. There are consequences for voting a particular member.
Yep.
And we just have to live with that. So That's it for now.
Yes, happy voting.
Okay, bye bye.
Bye bye.